The silent entrance. The academy bell rang through the long glass hallway, its echo bouncing against the metal walls. Students rushed inside, talking and laughing, their voices mixing into one loud hum. It was just another morning in the Galactic Academy of Strategic Sciences, a place where the smartest young minds from dozens of planets came to study. The classroom for interstellar history and tactics was already half full. The teacher, Professor Rallon, a tall insectoid with a thin voice, tapped on his digital board. "All right, class, let's begin," he said, adjusting his multi-eyed glasses. But before he could start, the door slid open. The sound was soft, but it cut through the chatter like a blade through cloth. A tall figure stepped inside. He wore a long black coat, the kind that trailed just above the floor. His boots were heavy but silent. His head was slightly tilted down, so his face was hidden under the shadow of the hood. In one slow motion, he closed the door behind him, not looking at anyone, not saying a word. The room went quiet. Every student felt it, an invisible weight in the air, the kind of feeling that makes the hair on your neck rise, the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but full of danger. Professor Rallon's voice caught in his throat. "Can I help you?" The man didn't answer. He raised his head just enough for the light to catch his eyes. They were sharp, too sharp. He looked around the room slowly, like he was searching for something or someone. In the back row, a human named Kale sat with one leg crossed over the other, leaning back in his chair. He was the only human in the academy. Most students thought of him as strange, too quiet, too direct, too dangerous. Some whispered about Deathworlders when he walked by, but most dismissed it as just a scary story about humans coming from a lethal planet. The stranger's yes locked onto Kale. The air grew heavier. Several students shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. One alien girl whispered, "Who is that?" Another student, a reptilian with scales that darkened when nervous, muttered, "I've seen his face. In the criminal database." Professor Rallon tried again, his voice shaking. "This classroom is for enrolled students only." The man in the black coat ignored him. His gaze never left Kyle. Slowly, he began walking forward, boots making a dull sound against the floor. The rest of the class leaned away as he passed their desks. When he was halfway down the aisle, Kyle finally moved. He uncrossed his legs and sat up straight. His expression was calm, almost bored, as if he had been waiting for this moment. The man stopped 2 desks away from him. "So," he said in a low, gravelly voice, "you're the Deathworlder." The word spread through the classroom like a ripple in water. Some students gasped, others stared at Kale with wide eyes. The myth they laughed about was real. Kale tilted his head slightly. "Depends who's asking." The man reached into his coat. Several students gasped. A few stood from their seats. In one smooth motion, he pulled out a short, curved blade. Its edge shimmered faintly, glowing with forbidden plasma energy. "You're coming with me," the man said. "Alive or dead. Your choice." No one moved. The academy had rules. Weapons were banned inside. The guards were only seconds away if the alarm was triggered. But Professor Rallon's hand, which was already moving towards the hidden distress button on his desk, froze. He knew the killer's type: fast, unpredictable, and always ready to strike first. Kale's eyes moved once, from the blade to the man's stance, and then back up to his face. "You're making a mistake," Kale said softly. The killer smirked. "We'll see." He took one step forward, and in that same instant, Kale pushed his chair back. The sound was loud in the silent room. It wasn't fear in Kale's movements. It was preparation. The killer's smirk faded slightly. No one in the class dared to speak. Every breath felt louder than it should. Someone near the door whispered, "Security's coming," but it didn't feel soon enough. The killer twirled the blade in his hand, the glowing edge humming in the air. "I've heard stories," he said, "about your kind, about humans, that you're fast, strong, dangerous, but I think they're just tales to scare weak minds." KL didn't answer. He just looked at him with eyes that didn't blink. The killer tilted his head, studying Kale in return. For a moment, the room felt like a battlefield no one else could see. Two predators circling, waiting for the first move. Then, somewhere far down the hallway, the faint alarm began to sound. The killer smiled. Looks like I'll have to finish this quick. And with that, he stepped forward. Kyle didn't move. Not yet. Not until the moment was right. Deathworlders calm. The alarm's distant wail echoed down the corridor, a thin thread of sound that promised help, but not soon enough. Inside the classroom, no one moved. No one even dared to breathe too loud. Every student's eyes were locked on the space between KL and the stranger. The killer's boots made slow, deliberate thuds against the floor. His plasma blade glowed brighter now, a faint heat radiating from its edge. It hummed like a predator's growl before the kill. Kale stood still, arms relaxed at his sides, head slightly tilted as if he was studying a puzzle, not a threat. His calmness didn't match the danger in the room. It made it worse. The killer could feel it too. This wasn't fear. This was waiting. "You think the guards will save you?" the killer asked, stepping closer. His voice carried an edge of mockery. "By the time they get here, I'll have your head." Kale's reply was soft, but it carried across the room. "You won't touch me." A flicker of irritation crossed the killer's face. I, as used to victims begging, screaming, running, not standing still, not talking back like this. "Maybe you don't understand," the killer said, taking another step forward. "You're human. Your bones are fragile. Your reflexes slow compared to mine. I've killed fighters stronger than you." Kyle finally moved, just a single step sideways, his boots barely making a sound. His eyes never left the killer's face. "You've never fought a Deathworlder," he said, voice still calm. The word hung in the air. Several students flinched when Kale said it himself. It was one thing for aliens to whisper it like a rumor, but hearing a human own the title made it real. The killer gave a short, humorless laugh. "Deathworlder, right. Just a name to make children sleep with the lights on." Kyle's gaze shifted, not to the blade, but to the killer's stance. He noticed the weight distribution, the twitch in the man's left knee, the way his grip on the weapon tightened when he spoke. "Names don't matter," Kyle said. "Only survival does." The killer lunged. It wasn't a wild swing, it was fast, calculated, aimed at Kyle's ribs. But before the blade could make contact, Kyle shifted his weight, pivoting just enough for the attack to pass inches from him. He didn't even flinch. Gasps filled the room. The killer recovered quickly, stepping back, reassessing. "Lucky," he said. "Measured," Kale replied. The killer tried again, this time with a high slash aimed at Kale's neck. Again, Kale moved, not away, but just inside the arc of the swing, letting it pass harmlessly over his shoulder. He didn't strike back, not yet. Every dodge was effortless, almost lazy, as if Kale was reading the killer's moves before they happened. And in a way, he was. Deathworlder training wasn't something you learned in a classroom. It was written into the bones, burned into the instincts. Kale had grown up where the ground could swallow you whole, where animals twice your size hunted in silence, where storms could strip the skin from your body. He'd learned to see movement before it became action. The killer tried a third strike, faster, lower, aimed to cut Kale's legs from under him. Kale stepped over it like it was nothing more than a loose wire on the floor. The students couldn't believe what they were seeing. Even Professor Rallen's many eyes were locked on the human. The killer finally stepped back, breathing heavier now. His confidence was still there, but it was cracked. Kale took one slow step forward. "You're fighting like you've already won," he said, voice low but steady. "That's your first mistake." The killer's grip tightened. "And your mistake is thinking you can talk your way out of this." Kale's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. Not amusement, but something colder. "I'm not talking my way out. I'm giving you a chance to walk away." For the first time, the killer didn't answer right away. His eyes narrowed, as if he was trying to read the human the way the human was reading him. But Kyle gave nothing away, no fear, no anger, no impatience. Just steady, unshakable stillness. Somewhere beyond the door, the sound of approaching boots echoed faintly. Security was getting closer. But in that room between Kale and the killer, time felt frozen. The killer made his choice. His feet shifted, his shoulders tensed. Kale's eyes sharpened. The next move would decide everything. The first move. The tension snapped like a wire under too much strain. The killer lunged first, faster than most eyes could follow. His blade came low, then arched upward in a deadly curve aimed at Kale's chest. But Kale moved before it even got close. It wasn't a big motion, no flashy spin, no wild dodge, just a sharp shift of weight, a single sidestep that made the killer's strike cut through empty air. The blade hummed past him with a heat that brushed Kale's ribs, but it never touched him. The class erupted in gasps. The killer didn't stop. His second strike came, immediately horizontal, aimed at Kale's throat. Kale ducked, the motion smooth, almost casual, like a man stepping under a low doorway. His hand brushed the killer's wrist, not enough to grab, just enough to feel the tension in the tendons. "You lead with your right," Kale said quietly, "every time." The killer snarled, "Shut up." Strike 3 came even faster, straight thrust to the heart. Kale twisted sideways, letting the blade pass just under his arm. His shoulder bumped the killer's enough to throw him slightly off balance. The killer growled in frustration. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. His style was built on speed, intimidation, aggression. But the human wasn't intimidated. The human wasn't even breathing hard. Kale stepped back, just out of range. His eyes stayed locked on the killer's movements, not the weapon. "Your knee," Kale said calmly, "is favoring the left. Injury or just sloppy training?" The killer's eyes narrowed. Professor Rallen's many hands trembled near the desk. He didn't dare trigger the distress button again. The wrong sound could set the killer off. The students sat frozen, watching a fight that felt more like a test Kale was in complete control of. Then the killer tried something different. Feint high, swing low. It was a move meant to bait a defender into guarding the wrong direction. Most opponents would fall for it. Kale didn't. As the blade came for his legs, Kale stepped forward instead of back, killing the weapon's momentum before it could gain power. He was close now, too close for the killer to use the blade effectively. The killer hissed and shoved Kale backward, trying to regain space. Kale let him. "You're getting slower," Kale said, his voice still calm. A muscle in the killer's jaw twitched. "And you're running out of room to dodge." Kale didn't reply. He simply adjusted his stance, feet apart, weight even, balanced. His breathing was steady, his hands loose. Every muscle was ready, but not tense. The killer spun the blade in his grip, switching to an underhand hold. His eyes darted to the door. Security was getting closer. If he didn't end this now, it would be over. He charged. The sound of his boots hitting the floor was drowned out by the sudden rush of motion. The blade came down in a brutal overhead slash. And Kale, finally, moved to strike. His right hand shot up, palm catching the killer's wrist mid-swing. His left hand clamped on the forearm, locking the joint. With a quick pivot of his hips, Kale redirected the force sideways. The blade's glowing edge missed his head by inches, slicing into the desk beside them with a hiss of burning metal. Before the killer could pull back, Kale's knee drove into his midsection, controlled, precise, enough to knock the air out of him without breaking bone. The killer staggered back, coughing once, but didn't drop the weapon. Kale didn't press the attack. He stepped back again, giving the killer space, almost inviting him to try again. It wasn't mercy, it was bait. And the killer took it. With a furious snarl, he launched himself at Kale for the fourth time, wild now, his precision cracking under frustration. The strikes came faster, but also sloppier. Kale parried each one with minimal movement, his eyes never leaving the killer's face. And then, for the briefest moment, Kale's gaze shifted to the killer's footwork. He saw it, the flaw, the opening. Kale's shoulders relaxed. His stance changed. The next move would not be a dodge. The next move would end it. Human psychology. The killer circled, breathing harder now. Sweat glistened on the ridges of his forehead. His blade still glowed, but his swings had lost that perfect sharpness they had at the start. Kyle noticed everything, the heavier steps, the micro pauses before each strike, the way the killer's eyes darted, not just at Kale, but at the door, at the walls, at the windows, searching for something he wasn't finding. You're slowing down, Kale said softly. The killer's eyes narrowed. You think I'm tired? No, Kale replied. I think you're scared. A few students gasped quietly. The killer laughed once, sharp and humorless. Scared. I've fought in the pits of Trask. I've killed mercenaries twice my size. I don't fear anyone. Kale took a slow step closer. His voice didn't rise, but somehow it felt louder. You've fought people who were like you. You've never fought someone who isn't. You don't know what I am. The killer's smirk twitched. A human, a Deathworlder, just a story. Kale tilted his head. Stories come from somewhere. The killer tried to mask his unease with another attack, a sudden thrust aimed at Kale's throat. But Kale didn't move back this time. His hand shot out, catching the killer's wrist mid-lunge. He didn't squeeze hard, just enough for the killer to feel the strength there. You breathe faster when you miss, Kale said, his eyes locked on the killer's. Your stance drops a little on your left side when you're angry, and your right shoulder, it's weaker. Old injury? The killer yanked his hand free and stepped back. Stop talking. Kale didn't stop. He stepped forward again, his voice calm, almost conversational. You're not thinking about winning anymore. You're thinking about escaping. That's the second mistake. The killer's grip on his weapon tightened until his knuckles went pale. He lunged again, faster, angrier, but Kyle moved like water, slipping past the strikes, barely touching the blade, every movement efficient and precise. The fight wasn't about speed or strength anymore. It was about control. And Kale had it. With every missed strike, the killer's breathing grew heavier. His attacks became wilder. His eyes darted more often to the door, calculating how much longer until security arrived. Kale's voice was low now, almost like he was speaking to himself. You came here thinking you'd scare everyone. You thought you'd choose the fight. But the moment you walked through that door, you were already in mine. The killer hesitated mid-swing. Kale stepped closer, just inside the killer's reach, forcing him to adjust his stance. That's the problem with predators who've only hunted prey. The first time they meet another predator, they don't know what to do. The killer's breathing hitched. His blade lowered a fraction, just enough to show doubt. Kale saw it. One student in the front row whispered, "He's breaking him." The killer realized too late that he'd let his guard drop. He swung again, desperate, but this time Kale didn't dodge. He stepped into the attack. His hand caught the killer's wrist again, twisting it just enough for pain to shoot up his arm. The blade wavered, and Kale's other hand pressed against the killer's chest, not shoving, not striking, just holding him in place. "Last chance," Kale said quietly. "Walk away." The killer's jaw clenched. His eyes darted to the door. He could hear the pounding footsteps of security getting closer. But more than that, he could feel Kale's grip. Not just strong, not just unshakable. Dangerous in a way he couldn't fully understand. And for the first time since stepping into the room, the killer hesitated. The break. The killer's hesitation lasted only a breath, but in a fight like this, a breath was too long. Kyle felt the shift, the tiny flicker of doubt. That was all he needed. The killer tried to pull back, but Kyle's grip tightened on his wrist, his fingers locking like steel. In one smooth motion, Kyle twisted the arm sideways, forcing the killer's shoulder to turn. The blade's plasma edge angled harmlessly toward the floor. There was a sharp metallic clink. The weapon slipped from the killer's hand and clattered onto the desk beside them, its glow fading as it hit the surface. The sound was small, but it might as well have been thunder in the silent room. Gasps broke out across the class. The killer staggered, eyes wide. How? Kale didn't give him time to finish. He stepped in close, his body angled to block the killer's path. His left hand pressed lightly against the killer's chest. Not enough to hurt, but enough to remind him exactly how close they were. "You're done," Kale said quietly. The killer's eyes darted to the door as if measuring his chances, but Kale read the thought instantly. He stepped just enough to block the aisle completely. Behind them, the heavy boots of security guards pounded closer, the sound growing louder with each second. "You think this is over because you have me cornered?" the killer growled, trying to sound dangerous again. Kale's expression didn't change. "No," he said, voice calm but firm. "It's over because you've already lost." The killer lunged, not for the weapon this time, but for Kale's throat. Kale's right hand shot up, catching the incoming arm. In the same breath, his knee came up sharply into the killer's abdomen. It wasn't a wild, crushing blow. It was controlled, precise, hitting just enough to knock the air from his lungs. The killer gasped, body folding forward instinctively. Kale stepped sideways, guiding the killer's momentum toward the wall. With a simple pivot, he forced him face first against it, one arm twisted behind his back. The killer tried to struggle, but Kale's grip locked like a vice. No matter how much he shifted, the hold didn't loosen. "You can fight until the guards get here," Kale said, leaning close enough for only the killer to hear. "Or you can walk out alive. Choose." The killer's breathing was ragged now. The fight in his body was still there, but the certainty was gone. His head tilted just enough to glance at the students, all watching in stunned silence. That look, their eyes on him, seemed to burn more than Kale's grip. He stopped struggling. A moment later, the classroom door slid open, with a hiss. Two armed security officers stormed in, weapons raised, but froze at the sight before them. The human had the killer completely pinned. Kale stepped back slowly, releasing the hold. The killer didn't try to run. He just stood there, head lowered until the guards grabbed him and snapped energy cuffs around his wrists. As they dragged him toward the door, the killer glanced back at Kale. His expression wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even hate. It was fear. Kale simply watched him go. The lesson. The door closed behind the security team with a low hiss. The sound lingered in the quiet room like the echo of something that shouldn't have happened here. No one moved. Students sat frozen at their desks, wide-eyed, staring at Kale as if they were seeing him for the first time. A few still had their hands clenched on the edges of their seats. Others kept darting glances at the dented desk where the killer's blade had bitten deep into the metal. Professor Rowland was the first to speak. His voice was shaky but trying to sound composed. "Mr. Kale, would you care to explain what exactly just happened?" Kale didn't answer right away. He reached down, picked up his chair, and set it upright. Then he sat, leaning back like the last few minutes had been nothing more than a mild inconvenience. "He made a mistake," Kale said simply. Rowland's antennae twitched in confusion. "What kind of mistake?" Kale's eyes scanned the room. He thought this was his fight. It wasn't. It was mine from the moment he walked through the door. A murmur ran through the students. Some leaned forward, listening carefully. Kale continued, his tone calm, almost like a lecture. "He came here expecting prey, people who'd panic, people who'd give him control. But I don't give control away." A young alien near the front row raised a hesitant hand. "But you're human. You don't have claws, or scales, or armor. How?" Kyle gave the faintest smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Where I'm from, everything is stronger than you. Everything has teeth, venom, or speed that can kill you in seconds. My people learn to survive by paying attention. Every movement, every breath, every mistake." He tapped the desk lightly with his knuckle. "Strength isn't about having sharper claws. It's about knowing where to stand so the claws miss you." The room stayed silent, every student hanging on his words. "You saw me dodge," Kale went on. "You thought I was avoiding him. I wasn't. I was learning him, how he moves, where his weight sits, which side he favors. The moment I understood him, the fight was already over." The reptilian student in the back spoke up, voice quiet. "That's terrifying." Kale shrugged. "That's surviving a death world." The door slid open again, and this time the headmaster stepped in. An older, broad-shouldered alien with silver streaks running across his chitin plates. He walked straight to Kale's desk and stopped. His eyes, dark and unreadable, studied the human for several long seconds. "I've seen soldiers lose to men like him," the headmaster said. "But you didn't even draw blood." Kale met his gaze. "I didn't need to." The headmaster gave a slow nod, then turned to the class. "What you saw today," he said, his deep voice filling the room, "is the difference between training for battle and living it every day. There's a reason Deathworlders are feared in every corner of the galaxy." Every student turned to look at Kyle again, this time not with fear alone, but with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Kyle didn't bask in it. He just leaned back in his chair, eyes half-lidded, as if the whole thing had been nothing more than another lesson. But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. The killer's eyes, the way he had looked back at him before being taken away. There would be more to come. The name they'll remember. News traveled faster than light in the Galactic Academy. By the end of the day, the story had spread to every corridor, every mess hall, every dorm room. A killer had walked into a classroom. He'd been armed, dangerous, and confident. But a human, one unarmed student, had stopped him without spilling a drop of blood. They called it a miracle. Some called it a warning. And everywhere Kale went, conversations went silent the moment he stepped into earshot. By the next morning, the news had reached beyond the academy walls. Hollow screens in the city replayed shaky classroom footage captured by a student's wrist cam, the killer's strikes, Kale's calm dodges, the single precise disarm. The footage was watched millions of times in a single day. The title under every replay was the same: The Human Deathworlder, Who Stopped the Killer. Kale didn't care for the attention. He walked through the academy halls like nothing had changed, but the way people looked at him had. There was more space around him now. No one brushed past him by accident. No one tested him with casual jokes. 3 days later, the headmaster called him into his office. "He asked for you," the headmaster said without looking up from his desk. Kyle didn't need to ask who. The killer. He was being held in a high-security prison on the far side of the colony. Armed guards escorted Kale through long metal corridors, past energy barriers and locked gates, until they reached a small room divided by a thick pane of reinforced glass. The killer was already there, sitting on the other side. He looked different now, no weapon, no coat, just plain prison gray. But his eyes were the same, sharp and watchful. When he saw Kyle, he leaned forward. "You didn't beat me," he said. Kyle sat down in the chair opposite him. "I didn't have to." The killer's lips twisted into something between a sneer and a smile. "You could have killed me. Why didn't you?" Kyle leaned back slightly. "Because I wanted you to remember this. I wanted you to know there's something out there you can't beat." The killer studied him for a long moment, then leaned back and gave a short, bitter laugh. "Deathworlder." Kale stood. "Remember it." He walked out without looking back. That night, the academy's central courtyard was full of students. Some stood in small groups, whispering. Others sat alone, still processing the events of the week. When Kale passed through, the whispers followed him like a shadow. But there was no fear in them anymore, only respect. For weeks afterwards, stories of that day continued to grow. Some exaggerated it, claiming Kyle had moved faster than the eye could see, or that he'd broken the killer's weapon in his bare hands. Others turned it into legend, saying the killer had begged for his life. Kyle never corrected any of them. He didn't need to. Because the truth was simple. When the killer had walked into that room, he had chosen the wrong prey. And now, across the academy, across the city, and in places Kyle hadn't even been yet, his name was remembered. Not just as a student, not just as a human, but as the Deathworlder who left a killer frozen,